Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers, sisters. We're going to continue the discussions on the Quran and Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. In the last discussion, we talked about Surah Ar-Raad, verse 31, in which Allah mentions that if there was a Quran that could have, with which you would have been able to talk to the dead or move the mountains, this would have been the Quran. And we talked about that there is a small group amongst all the Muslims who believe in the Quran who have shown the miracles that Allah mentioned in the Quran. And that is the progeny of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so that we know that what are these personalities for whom we should ask Allah to give us their marfa and their love in our hearts, because if we have their love we can conquer anything, because then we will be fulfilling the requirement that Allah has about taqwa. And once we fulfill the requirement, then Allah will solve our problems from the sources that we do not know, and that is the reason why our problems are not solved. So I'm going to talk about another verse of the Quran to solidify the point that I mentioned from Surah Ar-Raad. This is from Surah Al-Naml, where Allah mentions that there is nothing in the heavens or earth which is not written down or documented in the book. So Allah mentions that everything is documented, is captured in the book. On the other hand, Allah also mentions in the Quran, if seven oceans, seven seas, and seven lands, and all the trees on the lands would have become pen, and all the oceans would have become ink, Allah's words, Allah's kalamat would not be documented, even if seven more oceans would come to help them. But at the same time, Allah mentions in Surah Al-Naml that there is nothing in the heavens or the earth that is hidden except it is written in the book. And Surah Ar-Radh, Allah mentions, as I mentioned previously in verse 31, that if there was a Quran with which you would have talked, with which to the dead, and with which the mountains would have moved. So now we need to understand what is that Qitaab, what is that Quran, and what we're reading, is that the same Quran? Allah Ta'ala mentions in Surah Yusuf verse 1, Alif Lam Ra Tilka Ayatul Quran Qitaab Al-Mubeen. Allah Ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Hijr verse 1, Alif Lam Ra. These are the verses, ayat of Qitaab and Quran and Mubeen. And then Allah Ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Dukhan verses 1 and 2, Ha Mim wal Kitab al-Mubeen. Now Allah Ta'ala has mentioned two different words, Qitaab al-Mubeen, Quran and Mubeen. And all the verses, Allah Ta'ala is mentioning that these verses that you're reading are of Kitab al-Mubeen and Quran al-Mubeen. So this is the book that Allah is mentioning. Now there are arguments that about the compilation of the book and why that full book that Imam Ali alayhi salam had did not, or the Muslims or the Caliph at that time did not accept that book. I'm not going to talk about that concept here, but this book that is between in the two binders known as Quran, this is Quran. There is no other Quran in this world, and this is the Quran that the Imams have said that this Quran is sufficient for everyone. So this is the Quran which has all the knowledge, which has all the hidden aspect mentioned in the book in by Allah, which Allah mentions in Surah Al-Naml, as I talked about in verse 75, and Surah Ar-Raad, the Quran with miracles, in verse 31. So now this is the Quran, but not everyone knows all the knowledge. So there must be few people who have shown the miracles, they would know the knowledge. So, is there a narration or an event that unfolded in the lives of the Imams or in the lives of the Prophet, in the life of the Prophet, or is there a verse that talks about that there is a group of people who have been given the full knowledge of the book? Because not everyone has the knowledge, but there are few people who have the knowledge. So we're going to talk about that particular topic from Surah Al-Fatir, because in Surah Al-Fatir, Allah mentions that Allah has made certain people the, the people who inherit the book from among His creation. In verse 32. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.